Part 56. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocnu. Chapter 551. The roar of fighting came to my ears, and I could even smell the bloody smell in the air. Muchu stood quietly in the wilderness, surrounded by countless zombies and the eternal night royal family fighting fiercely. But Muchu turned a deaf ear to all this and looked up at the sky. Under the dark sky, a figure stood in the air, surrounded by endless evil spirits, looking down with a cold face. It was Muchu's disciple, Shwekanya, known as the demon lord of the nether evil. Shwekanya at this time was no longer the young girl of the past, only her cold face could still vaguely see some of the shadow of the little girl. She stretched out her green jade hand, and the evil spirits of the nether world gathered under her, while her left hand flashed with a green light representing vitality. At this moment, the majestic energy blasted downwards, and the two beams of light representing life and death alternately merged, and finally all returned to the wilderness. Then, an amazing scene happened. Countless fierce-looking ghosts emerged from the ground, raging on the battlefield. When these ghosts poured into the broken corpses on the ground, the broken zombies opened their eyes again and stood up tremblingly. The zombies that were resurrected again were even more ferocious and brutal. Even if their hands and feet were broken, they would struggle to get up, but this time they turned their attacks to their companions. In this way, countless zombies were first killed by the eternal night royal family, but the dead bodies were resurrected again under the influence of the way of life and death, and the cycle repeated. In a moment, a large number of zombies had turned their backs on the battlefield, and the war ended with the Eternal Night dynasty winning a great victory. The cheers of the Eternal Night people and the roars of the corpses came from the ground. Under the influence of the evil spirit of life and death, even the corpses were subdued by Shwekanya. As the focus of hundreds of thousands of eyes, Shwekanya, who stood in the air, exuded a majestic aura and a majestic look. The cold girl in the memory has grown into a peerless and charming empress at this moment. Shwekanya turned around and looked at the dark blind spot in front of her. Her eyes were deep and her cold voice echoed throughout the world. From now on, I will guard the territory of eternal night in place of my teacher until the reincarnation changes and all races are annihilated. At this moment, the world was silent, and even the existence hidden in the darkness was shocked by Shwekanya's strong aura. Since then, the second generation of demon lords after the Lord of Eternal Night has been born, which also means that the Eternal Night dynasty and even the entire end of the world will enter a new era. Muchu saw all this, and the surrounding scene became blurred again. "You've grown up, little girl." A smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. The girl with a determined look in her mind could now stand on her own and become the queen of eternal night who shocked all races. The ground under her feet became dark, and the zombie monsters around her disappeared, as if everything that had just happened was just an illusion. Muchu smiled and shook his head, turning around to walk into the dark red light door behind him. "Teacher." Just as Muchu turned around, a gentle voice suddenly came from behind him. When the familiar voice came, Muchu's pupils jumped suddenly, and he slowly turned around. On the sky behind him that had not yet dissipated, the cold and beautiful figure floated towards her, like a fairy descending to the earth. A rare softness appeared on her beautiful face. There was yearning, admiration, and a hint of indescribable complexity in her eyes when she looked at Muchu. Shwekanya stretched out her slender jade hand, as if she wanted to touch the figure in front of her that was deeply engraved in her mind, and her cherry lips opened and closed. "Teacher, we are all waiting for you." But before she could touch Muchu, Shwekanya's figure had gradually become blurred and transparent. "Always, always." The next moment, the woman's body turned into white spots of light and dissipated in this empty space. The whole world became dark, leaving only Muchu and the crimson evil ghost gate behind him. Oh, and there was also a beast-eared girl lying unconscious on the side. Puff. A pool of bright red blood splashed into the sky, and the village chief's burly figure was blasted back by a huge force, instantly smashing a deep pit in the sand in the distance. As the sand flew, the bloody body of the village chief appeared in the huge pit. The intertwined flesh was covered with hideous wounds, and the blood was dripping, and the appearance was miserable. The wanted criminal of the human race who roamed the northern desert 40 years ago, Kwaitu, I didn't expect you to hide in such a remote village. A tall human figure slowly walked towards the pit, followed by a large number of alien troops. The figure's facial features were similar to those of humans, but his skin was a strange green color, and there were strange runes on his face, and his teeth looked like the mouthparts of some arthropods. He was wearing armor, holding a pitch-black spear in his hand, with a long scorpion tail behind him, and a terrifying aura that made people's heart palpitate. This person was the patriarch of the Sand Scorpion clan, and also the Northern Desert Lord who commanded the entire Northern Desert. Village Chief. When Hong Lian and others saw the miserable appearance of the village chief, they immediately burst into tears and looked indignant. The old man who fell in the sand pit struggled to stand up, and all the muscles in his body were shaking and contracting unconsciously. He roared and was about to pounce on the Lord of North Desert, but the latter just stood there, and the scorpion tail behind him twitched and instantly pierced through the old man's chest. The Lord of North Desert waved his arm, and the spear in his hand stabbed out, instantly tearing the village chief's arm. The burly body rolled on the ground one after another, and another mouthful of blood spurted out. This time, the old man couldn't support the load of his body after all. His burly body shrank instantly, and only skin and bones were left, and he was barely breathing. The Lord of North Desert looked at the old man who was about to reach the end of his life, and said in a low voice, "If it were you 40 years ago, you might still be a little tricky, but you are still too weak now. Human existence is too weak after all, whether in strength or lifespan. As the opponent 40 years ago, the Lord of Northern Desert is now in his prime, and has even been promoted to a lord, while the old man can only live the rest of his life in this desolate Gobi desert." The Lord of Northern Desert looked at the surviving human race. "Humans of the fire seed, hand over the magic soldiers you hold, and your companions can still live in peace. Otherwise, the entire human race of Northern Desert will be blood-bathed because of you." The voice with a fierce aura instantly echoed throughout the ruined village, but only a few hundred people could really hear it. A village of thousands of people, only a few hundred people were left under the slaughter of the alien army. Even so, these hundreds of surviving humans were all covered with scars and in a tragic condition. Hong Lian held the colorful stone plate in her hand, with bright red blood flowing from the corners of her mouth, and a look of determination flashed in her eyes. Is their effort in vain? Blood oozed from her palms due to excessive force, and when her blood dripped onto the stone plate, instantly, the colorful light on the stone plate became brighter, and a sound of breaking through the air suddenly came from the distant sky. In a blink of an eye, a huge monster several feet high appeared in front of Hong Lian. This scene instantly shocked everyone present, and they stared at the suddenly appeared steel monster with their eyes wide open. At this moment, the colorful stone plate in Hong Lian's hand actually clicked and exploded into a ball of powder, and a beam of colorful light shot directly into Hong Lian's body. In an instant, Hong Lian's heart seemed to have some kind of connection with the steel monster in front of her, and she looked up at the behemoth in front of her. I saw that the front of the steel monster also released a beam of colorful light, absorbing Hong Lian's entire body. At this moment, the steel monster seemed to have a soul, and a beam of red light flashed in its dark pupils, and even the white fuselage turned into a deep blue color in an instant. I didn't expect that legend to be true. The Lord of Bamo looked at the steel monster controlled by Hong Lian, with obvious shock in his eyes. Legend has it that Bamo has always sealed the personal magic soldier of the second generation of demon lords, the crystallization of technology that brought salvation to the end of the world, the Apocalypse Mecha. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 552. Bayemo Lord's eyes were filled with shock and a hint of greed. This was the magic weapon that the Demon Lord had used before. Recalling the rumors about the Apocalypse mech, Bayemo Lord's eyes became even more scorching. The power of this magic weapon was brought to its extreme, even as powerful as a lord. According to the current classification of magic weapons, it is definitely a red level, and this alone is enough for him to do everything he can to seize it. Seeing the greed in Bayemo Lord's eyes, the fierce bear beside him had already rushed out with the magic weapon broadsword in his hand. I am willing to share the worries for the Lord. As a man with ambitions, he would not miss any opportunity to please his superiors. The burly fierce bear rushed towards the direction of the steel monster, swinging the broadsword in his hand with a fierce momentum. Hong Lian, who was inside the mech, was shocked when he saw this, and subconsciously blocked with his arm. But she felt that the energy in her body was strangely absorbed by the thin wire wrapped around her arm. However, the next second, a cannon suddenly appeared on the arm of the mecha, and the enhanced flames gushed out in an instant, all bombarding the armored bear. In an instant, the huge body of the bear was blown away, rolling on the ground like a gourd. The armor on his body was directly pierced, and his body was covered with charred marks. He fainted instantly due to the serious injury. Hong Lian was inside the mecha, and raised his arm in disbelief. I did this. With just this one blow, he defeated a 9th level demon general. Everyone present was shocked and horrified. The power of this mecha is so terrifying, it is worthy of being a powerful red quality demon soldier. The face of the Lord of Bamo changed, and his eyes became more and more burning. If he got this mecha, wouldn't it be equivalent to Bamo having another Lord level combat power? Without any extra nonsense, the Lord of the Northern Desert flashed and attacked the Apocalypse mech. He must get this magic weapon with his own hands. In an instant, the Lord of the Northern Desert rushed over with a huge magic power, but Hong Lian could only subconsciously raise his arms to block. The magic weapon spear hit the solid shell of the mech one after another, and a sound of metal clashing suddenly sounded. The figure of the Apocalypse mech also retreated under the fierce impact. Hong Lian, who had just entered the mech, was not familiar with the operation of the Apocalypse mech and could only passively withstand the attack from the outside. The Lord of the Northern Desert raised his spear and hit the Apocalypse mech frantically. The scorpion tail behind him stabbed out one after another, but there was no damage except for a few scratches on the shell of the mech. Hong Lian stabilized her body and was about to operate the mech again to release the flame cannon. But this time, the bloodline connecting her body instantly drained the few magic energies in her body. The mecha's mechanical right arm also brewed destructive energy at this time, and fired at the direction of the Northern Desert Lord. The Northern Desert Lord's eyes suddenly flashed with shock, and he actually felt a hint of threat from this beam of light cannon. He quickly retreated backwards, and as the magic energy surged, the gravel under his feet turned into a vortex of sand that wrapped the giant cannon that was bombarding from a distance. The sweeping wind and sand consumed most of the magic energy contained in the cannon, but even so, the destructive artillery fire still penetrated the sand and dust and bombarded the Northern Desert Lord behind him. The Northern Desert Lord knew that he could not dodge such a large-scale attack, and immediately drove the scorpion tail behind him to circle in front of him into a shield. The fierce artillery bombarded in front of the Northern Desert Lord at this moment, and the residual power of the artillery alone caused the surrounding sand to fall inch by inch. The explosion lasted for several breaths before gradually dissipating. When everyone looked at the center of the explosion, a huge deep pit had appeared there. The figure of the Lord of the Northern Desert appeared in the deep pit after the explosion, and the armor on his chest had already appeared with cracks. He looked at the somewhat charred scorpion tail, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. At this moment, the huge steel monster in front of him showed abnormality. I saw a red light flashing frequently on the chest of the Apocalypse mech, accompanied by a series of alarm sounds. The energy for the Apocalypse mech to operate was completely exhausted, and the huge steel mech disintegrated in an instant, turning into a little starlight and condensing into the colorful stone plate. Hong Lian staggered and fell to the ground, exhausted. The cost of operating the Apocalypse mech is too high, far beyond what she, a demon general, can bear. The 2 artillery shots just now have already exhausted the remaining magic power in her body, and now it is even difficult to maintain the operation of the mech. Everything failed in the end. Seeing this, Lord Bamo immediately led his men to surround the remaining humans. Seeing Lord Bamo walking towards his sister, Au excitedly rushed to Lord Bamo, but was whipped away by the latter's tail whip. Lord Bamo's eyes flashed with greed, and he was about to reach out to Hong Lian. Suddenly, as if he felt something, he turned around and looked. Who is it? In the distance, on the sand dunes filled with wind and sand, 2 figures, one large and one small, could be seen walking slowly. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 553. In the flying dust, 2 figures, one large and one small, could be seen walking slowly from the sand dunes behind the village. The taller one was a human man in a black robe, with a handsome face, fluttering clothes, and a smile on his face. Next to him was a petite girl with animal ears, who looked cute and seemed to have just woken up, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Mu Qiu walked out of the back mountain with Qi Xiaoxiao and saw the scene in front of them. The peaceful and quiet village was covered by war, and the simple houses built of sandstone collapsed. There were broken corpses all around, and the blood stained the sand under his feet into a bloody color. The girl next to him was a little at a loss. She remembered that she had entered a bloody space and then she had no memory at all. However, Mu Qiu's face showed no surprise at all. He just looked at the dark clouds above his head and squinted his eyes as if nothing had happened. It's unexpectedly lively here. The Lord of Bamo looked at the 2 people who suddenly appeared. When he saw Qi Xiaoxiao standing next to Mu Qiu, his expression suddenly changed. Your Highness, the Crown Prince's consort, I didn't expect you to be here. The Crown Prince's consort? Mu Qiu looked down at the beast-eared girl beside him, who immediately showed an embarrassed expression. Your Highness, the Crown Prince has been looking for you in the Bamo area for a long time. I hope you can go back as soon as possible and don't embarrass Lord Xiaowang. Qi Xiaoxiao hurriedly turned her head away, covering her face, revealing only a pair of smart eyes, and said in panic. I'm not, you recognized the wrong person. After saying that, she glanced at Mu Qiu beside her with a guilty conscience, and her little thoughts were obvious. Mu Qiu looked at Qi Xiaoxiao with interest. It was obvious that this was what the little girl had hidden from him. He didn't care about Qi Xiaoxiao's identity, but only cared about her ability to sense the power of reincarnation. Looking around at the mess, Mu Qiu said to Qi Xiaoxiao. Let's go. The purpose of this trip was to find clues to open the 6 Paths Gate. Now that one of the shackles had been opened by him, there was no point in staying here. As for the battle that took place here, he was not interested at all. This understated sentence made Qi Xiaoxiao's eyes sparkle with stars, and she nodded subconsciously. Yeah. Just as the 2 were about to turn around and leave, the low voice of the Lord of the Northern Desert suddenly came from behind. Wait. At the signal of the Lord of the Northern Desert, the alien army behind them surrounded Mu Qiu and the others. Your Highness, the Crown Prince's consort, Lord Owl King has set a ban in both territories. You can't just leave now. The Lord of Northern Desert looked at Mu Qiu with a gloomy look. Human, you killed the locusts, and now you have kidnapped your Highness, the Crown Prince's consort. You are guilty of a heinous crime. Today, I will kill you to suppress my Northern Desert law. As soon as the words fell, the Lord of Northern Desert, who was wearing heavy armor, burst out with an extremely cold aura, and the spear in his hand also grew 2 pairs of spikes, which made people feel palpitating. Not to mention that the crown prince's consort was in the hands of the other party, he couldn't afford to offend the Owl King, not to mention that Muqiu had killed his trusted general. If he let the other party run away, wouldn't he, the Lord of Northern Desert, become a joke? Oh! Muqiu turned his head slightly, with a cold light flashing in his eyes. You really want to stop me? Humph! You are so arrogant, I want to see how capable you are. Seeing that a mere human dared to be so presumptuous to him, the Lord of Bamo was immediately furious, and regardless of the humans around him, he immediately ordered his men to take Muqiu down. In an instant, thousands of alien figures shouted and surrounded Muqiu. Thousands of strange figures rushed up in the sand. They were all elite troops under the Lord of Bamo. Each of them was above the 5th level of magic power, and they had just experienced a massacre, so they were full of surging murderous aura and extraordinary power. Facing the surging alien army, Qi Xiaoxiao was so scared that the pair of animal ears on her head drooped down, and her body trembled. But Muqiu beside her lowered his head slightly, with the broken hair on his forehead fluttering, looking calm and motionless. Amid the flying dust, thousands of aliens were only a few feet away from the two. Time seemed to be frozen at this moment. The next second, Muqiu suddenly raised his head, and a beam of red light flashed in his eyes. A blood-red color suddenly bloomed from the dark purple box in front of him, rushing straight into the sky. Indistinctly, a blood-red door that ordinary people could not see opened, with an ancient atmosphere, and at this moment, the world lost its color. The alien army rushing towards Muqiu suddenly stopped at this moment, and they were surprised to find that the surrounding scene suddenly changed. The sand under their feet disappeared, and the collapsed buildings and corpses disappeared. They seemed to be in a blood-red world, dead silent and without a trace of life. And Muqiu stood in the center of this blood-red world. Is it an illusion? The Lord of Bamo was in a blood-red world, subconsciously thinking that all this was an illusion created by the other party. But suddenly, a large amount of blood appeared on the ground beneath their feet, and the air was filled with a strong smell of blood. Gradually, the blood seeping out from the ground turned into a thick sea of blood, engulfing thousands of alien troops including the Northern Desert Lord. At this moment, countless pairs of skeleton blood hands suddenly stretched out from the endless sea of blood, and a series of heart-pounding roars came from the depths of the sea of blood. I saw skeletons surging out of the sea of blood, and bloody souls suddenly flew out of the sky, and countless undead evil spirits emerged in this bloody space. In an instant, the whole world turned into an unparalleled ghost den filled with all kinds of undead evil spirits. The alien army of only a few thousand people here is as small as a mayfly in the sea. Welcome to the 6 reincarnations. Standing in the middle of a sea of blood, Muqiu spoke slowly, like the whisper of a devil. As the voice fell, the evil ghosts and undead spirits floating between heaven and earth suddenly launched a siege on the alien army in the sea of blood. Some aliens were dragged into the endless sea of blood by countless pairs of ghost hands extending from below, their bodies turned into nutrients for the sea of blood, and their souls became part of countless dead souls. Some aliens were occupied by the evil ghosts floating in the sky, and launched suicidal attacks on their companions like crazy. The whole world instantly echoed with various shrill screams, but the more miserable the wailing, the more it could stimulate the murderous nature of these ghosts. In a short moment, the huge alien army had been swallowed up by the evil ghosts pouring out of the sea of blood, and countless casualties. Damn, what kind of ability is this? The Lord of Bamo was also surrounded by countless ghosts, with a look of shock on his face. Unlike the illusion he expected, everything here is so real that he can even feel that those men who were dragged into the sea of blood are really dead, and even the pain from the body is particularly real. As a lord, he struggled to resist the attacks of evil ghosts from all directions, but his body gradually sank into the sea of blood. From the depths of this bottomless sea of blood, he actually felt the threat of life. If this goes on, he will really die. Knowing this, the Lord of the Northern Desert turned his sights to Mu-Chiu, who was standing in the center of the sea of blood. The entire space was filled with bloody ghosts, but only the area around Mu-Chiu seemed to have formed a barrier, without any evil ghosts invading. Obviously, the other party was the initiator of all this. As long as this human is killed, these absurd ghosts will also end. The Lord of the Northern Desert roared, his eyes full of murderous intent. He simply threw away the magic soldier in his hand, and the magic energy around him exploded, and his body changed in an instant. His body began to swell, his armor tore, thick appendages grew under his feet, his arms turned into sharp pincers, and the scorpion tail behind him stretched several meters. In a blink of an eye, the human-shaped Lord of the Northern Desert turned into a huge and deadly giant scorpion. This is the true meaning of their Sand Scorpion clan, and it is also the most powerful form of the Lord of the Northern Desert. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 554. The Sand Scorpion transformed by the Northern Desert Lord broke through the siege of evil spirits and rushed towards Mu-Chiu with great momentum. Dark green venom spurted out from its sharp mouthparts and tail spines, and wherever it passed, even the surrounding evil spirits began to wail miserably. This venom can actually corrode the soul. Within a few breaths, the huge sand scorpion, several meters high, rode through the sea of blood, opening its ferocious mouthparts and ghastly sharp pincers. Www. Afterwards, a large pool of venom was sprayed out, cutting off Mu-Chiu's retreat. Seeing that the poisonous pincers were only a few feet away from Mu-Chiu's eyes, the latter's body did not move at all, and her pair of deep eyes remained unruffled. What he didn't expect was that just when Mu-Chiu's body was about to be crushed, the sea of blood in front of the latter seemed to be alive. It actually rose up in an instant and turned into a wall of blood standing in front of Mu-Chiu. All the venom that spewed out was swallowed up by the blood wall, and pairs of blood-colored ghost hands surged out of the sea of blood at the feet of the sand scorpion transformed by the Northern Desert Lord, dragging the sand scorpion's body tightly. The Northern Desert Lord tried to struggle, but the more he struggled crazily, more and more ghostly hands stretched out from under his feet and wrapped around his body. What's even more frightening is that these bloody hands are like gangrene attached to the bone, eroding into the body along the wounds on the body surface, madly sucking his blood and magic energy. Under the erosion of countless blood souls, the Northern Desert Lord's body became weaker and weaker, and in the end he even lost the strength to struggle. In the end, with the sand scorpion's earth-shattering long hiss, its huge body was dragged into the boundless sea of blood by countless pairs of bloody hands, and turned into one of the unparalleled ghostly dead souls. After the death of the Northern Desert Lord, all the alien armies under him were devoured by the dead souls of the sea of blood. During the whole process, Mu-Chiu stood there calmly, and devoured the Lord and the thousands of soldiers under his command without a single blow. This is the heaven-defying ability of the Hungry Ghost Path, one of the 6 paths the Sea of Blood space leads directly to the Netherworld. Through it, one can control the Netherworld ghosts and command the undead evil spirits. As long as Mu-Chiu wants, he can even communicate with the underworld, open the gate of the underworld through the Hungry Ghost Tunnel, and release the ghosts and ghosts sealed in it, causing life and death to be reversed and the world to be in chaos. Master, so amazing. The girl with animal ears next to her was dumbfounded. She expected that Mu-Chiu would be very powerful, but she never expected that Mu-Chiu's methods would be so powerful. The other party was a real lord, but Mu-Chiu didn't move an inch to kill him. This is simply an absolute crushing of disparity in strength. Qi Xiaoxiao licked her lips. She wanted to say, Master, I want to learn this. But he looked at the boundless sea of blood around him, where there were still souls that had not yet dissipated and were wailing miserably. Is this really all she can learn? In an empty wasteland, a blood-red door suddenly opened, and the figures of Mu Qiu and Qi Xiaoxiao stepped out. In the dilapidated village, Hong Lian and others still had a look of surprise on their faces. In their impression, the Northern Desert Lord led his troops to besiege Mu Qiu, and at the critical moment a brilliant red light was released in front of Mu Qiu. Then the figures of Mu Qiu, Bei Mo Lord and others disappeared, and after a few breaths, another red light flashed in front of them. When Mu Qiu appeared in front of everyone again, the Northern Desert Lord and the thousands of troops under his command had completely disappeared. What happened in the meantime? Gurren stood up with a trembling body. The intense load of the apocalypse mecha made her use all her strength just to stand up. Looking at the devastated village, surrounded by human limbs and broken arms, the flames burned the entire village to ashes. Looking around, there are only a few companions left, and the remaining humans died tragically under the slaughter of the alien army. The village they relied on for survival is gone. In the distant sky, a cavalry of several hundred people was looking at the villages in the distance. The leader was a man with dark purple skin and two horns on his head. The expression on the man's face was particularly complicated at this moment. "Your Highness, we..." One of the men came to the man's side, looked at everything happening in the village and spoke quietly. "Walk." Yesikong's pupils narrowed and he gave the order without hesitation. He had always had a high self-esteem and did not bother to join the massacre of humans, but he also witnessed everything that had just happened. Not to mention anything else, Mu Qiu's powerful ability to transfer thousands of people in an instant was far beyond what he could handle. Although Yesikong has an arrogant personality, he has reason and will never let himself die in the face of a powerful enemy. Such a powerful person has appeared in the human race. This matter must be reported to Father. In his eyes, Mu Qiu's strength far exceeded that of a lord, and he was most likely a king-level expert. Before leaving, he looked deeply at the animal-eared girl standing next to Mu Qiu in the village in the distance, and said softly, "Xiao Xiao, you can't escape, you will definitely become my wife. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, MOCNU. Chapter 555. At dusk, flames were rising over the polar Gobi Desert in the northern desert. The boiling flames were accompanied by charred embers flying over the village. The original human village had turned into a ruin at this time. Unlike the bonfire the day before, the flames this time were not burning firewood and food, but scarred and broken corpses. The remains of the villagers were gathered together and burned to ashes. In this desolate Gobi Desert, it is difficult to preserve human corpses. Cremation is the safest way. Hong Lian sat on the sand dune with her knees hugged, looking at the corpses of her companions burning in the raging fire below, with indescribable loneliness in her eyes. Everyone was still gathered together to talk and laugh the day before, imagining the paradise life after returning to their ancestral land, but now they have all turned into dead souls in the fire. The village of thousands of people was slaughtered by the alien army, leaving only Hong Lian and a few others alive. Obviously, just one step away. As long as they get the magic soldiers hidden in the forbidden area earlier, they can take the villagers away, but now they still fail. Feeling extremely regretful in their hearts, what did their human race do wrong to be treated so unfairly? Weakness is the original sin. Just then, a plain voice came from behind Hong Lian. She turned around in a hurry and saw Mu Qiu walking slowly with a calm face. Mu Qiu walked to Hong Lian's side and said so while looking at the corpses being devoured by the flames below. At this moment, Mu Qiu held the cute black cat in his arms. The latter licked his paws lazily, and his dark eyes were bright and energetic. After Mu Qiu mastered the hungry ghost way through the box of the monsters, the nether evil tiger living in the box of the monsters also underwent some changes. The most intuitive thing is that the fur on its body is no longer pure black, and blood can be vaguely seen between the black hair. Mu Qiu can feel that the black cat in his arms has exceeded the ordinary destruction level and is close to the source of Tao. Just like the previous BMO Lord, even if Mu Chiu did not take the initiative, the Nether Evil Tiger alone is enough to crush the BMO Lord. Senior. Seeing that the person coming is Mu Chiu, Hong Lian stood up hurriedly, with scars on her face that have not yet healed. Mu Chiu nodded, just looked at the fire below and said, "What are your plans next?" Hong Lian lowered her head slightly and said, "There are only a few of us left in the BMO fire seed. We want to return to our ancestral land to make plans. The identity of humans is the lowest in this world. Even Hong Lian, as a 9th level demon general, seems so small in front of various alien races. Only by relying on the ancestral land of the human race can they regain some dignity as human beings." Hong Lian did not hide her disappointment in the conversation with Mu Chiu. This battle almost extinguished the fire of the human race in BMO. Speaking of which, Mu Chiu saved their lives again this time, although it is not clear how the BMO Lord and those alien armies were completely wiped out by Mu Chiu. But there is no doubt that they are alive now thanks to Mu Chiu's rescue. Hong Lian did not forget to express gratitude to Mu Chiu, but Mu Chiu just smiled dumbly and did not say much. In fact, Mu Chiu had no intention of participating in this battle. If it were not for the BMO Lord's insistence on stopping him, Mu Chiu would have flew away with Qi Xiaoxiao at this moment. By the way, Senior, this is the magic weapon sealed in the forbidden area. Hong Lian condensed the stone plate emitting colorful light in his hand. The 7 different energies contain the power of space, and the Apocalypse Mecha was sealed in it. The source of Apocalypse that activated the Apocalypse Mech has been absorbed by Shueqianya. This colorful stone plate is probably a replica developed by later generations to replace energy. But what Hong Lian didn't expect was that Mu Chiu shook his head. "Since it has chosen you, it naturally has nothing to do with me www. The thousands of evil souls suppressed by the Apocalypse Mech have all been swallowed by Mu Chiu into the hungry ghost realm. For Mu Chiu, the Apocalypse Mech, which can exert destructive power, has brought him less than nothing. Even Shueqianya abandoned it, so there is no point for him to keep it." Mu Chiu's disdainful attitude shocked Hong Lian. "You know, this is a top-grade magic weapon with a red quality. Even the red magic weapon that the Owl King coveted was actually given to him." Mu Chiu's image gradually became extremely tall in Hong Lian's mind. What kind of identity is the man in front of him, the son of the ancestral land, the inheritor of the next generation of fire, or? Just as Hong Lian was thinking wildly, the aftermath of the village had come to an end. The flames burning the corpses had been extinguished, and the survivors such as Baron were ready to leave at any time. Surprisingly, Elder Chuan's, who came from the ancestral land, was still alive after experiencing a war with aliens. But he looked quite miserable at the moment, with one eye blind and half of his body wrapped in bandages. He participated in a war but gained nothing in the end. The illusion planted by Mu Chiu in his body was still effective. In Chuan's heart, he was still the holy envoy sent by the ancestral land, but he put Mu Chiu's orders above everything else. "Senior, won't you go with us?" Before leaving, Hong Lian looked back at Mu Chiu, who was teasing the kitten in his arms and didn't seem to move at all. Mu Chiu shook his head and said meaningfully, "I have more important things to do." As the sun set, Mu Chiu looked at the backs of everyone leaving, and turned his head to look at the girl with animal ears behind him. "Now, tell me about your story, our prince's concubine." Qi Xiaoxiao's furry animal ears shook on her head, blinked her eyes, and looked ignorant. "Master, what are you talking about?" Xiaoxiao doesn't understand. Mu Chiu teased the kitten's chin, squinted his eyes and said, "Tell the truth." Qi Xiaoxiao subconsciously shuddered, lowered her head, and walked to Mu Chiu's side with small steps, like a child who had done something wrong, and explained the whole story to Mu Chiu. It turned out that Qi Xiaoxiao did hide her origins from Mu Chiu. She was indeed born into a rich noble family, but this noble family was not an ordinary foreign family. Her father was a generation of Owl King who ruled a continent. And the one she married was not an ordinary person, but the biological son of the other Owl King, the Owl Prince who ruled the entire desert continent. It was in order to escape the tragic fate of political marriage that Chi Xiaoxiao stole the space crystal from her home and was accidentally teleported to the border of the northern desert. In order to avoid the pursuit of her family, Chi Xiaoxiao disguised herself all the way, and was finally bought by Mu Qiu when she pretended to be a slave, which led to the subsequent development. Chi Xiaoxiao explained everything she had concealed, and looked at Mu Qiu carefully, fearing that he would displease him. But Mu Qiu looked indifferent from beginning to end, stroking the black cat in his arms and said, "Your father is." Chi Xiaoxiao said solemnly. "One of the contemporary 12 night owls, the Chaos Beast Owl King who ruled Chaos Beast Continent, Qi Zhentian. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 556. The Beast Owl King. Mu Qiu's eyes were somewhat deep. Chi Xiaoxiao nodded heavily as if it was a serious matter. "Oh, I haven't heard of it." Mu Qiu's casual words almost made Chi Xiaoxiao fall. She almost forgot that the great god in front of her was an unworldly human race strongman who came out of a deep mountain and old forest, and knew nothing about these things. She was about to warn him that her father was an Owl King level peerless strongman who suppressed a continent and commanded a million beast tribes. But when she thought of the scene of Mu Qiu crushing the Lord of the North Desert with one hand in the Hungry Ghost Road, she was speechless. To be honest, the scene of controlling countless blood souls to wreak havoc on the world even made Chi Xiaoxiao, who grew up beside the Owl King and was well informed, feel extremely frightened. In her heart, Mu Qiu could already be on par with the Owl King level strongman, and perhaps the other party really didn't fear any Lord Owl King. This is indeed the case. The reason why Mu Qiu kept Chi Xiaoxiao by his side was just because he valued her abilities related to reincarnation. Mu Qiu looked at the confused look on the girl's face and turned to say, "What did you say before? How is the improvement of perception ability?" Compared with the girl's life experience, Mu Qiu was more interested in her abilities. Chi Xiaoxiao nodded hurriedly, wrinkled her nose, and looked into the distance. "I sensed that the breath similar to the door in Master's hand is in this direction." After a circle in the Hungry Ghost realm, Chi Xiaoxiao's 5 senses were further strengthened, and even the bottleneck of magic energy was loosened for a long time, and it was upgraded by several levels. The most intuitive point is that before, Chi Xiaoxiao could only vaguely sense things that were stained with the breath of reincarnation, but now she can accurately locate the location of the power of the 6 paths. Mu Qiu looked in the direction pointed by Chi Xiaoxiao and raised his hand. The dark purple box of the demon appeared on his chest, and a beam of red and white light shot into Mu Qiu's hand. A white light gate surrounded by clouds and mist appeared in Mu Qiu's palm, and 6 iron chains like cloud dragons and giant pythons were wrapped in front of the door. The ancient and majestic atmosphere suddenly came to his face. The Gate of Samsara. In the bloody world of the Hungry Ghost realm, the box of the demon seemed to have established a certain connection with the Gate of Samsara, allowing the Gate of Samsara to reside in the box of the demon. Unlike before, one of the 6 iron chains wrapped around the light gate has turned dark red. This represents the confinement of the Hungry Ghost realm, and it also means that Mu Qiu can exert and control the abilities of the Hungry Ghost realm. That direction. Mu Qiu narrowed his eyes were deep, and he patted the black cat in his arms. "Since you are full, you should move around." "Meow." The black cat cried out, and then jumped out of Mu Qiu's arms. Its body suddenly expanded, and its hair turned into black and red flowing flames, and it turned into a giant flowing flame tiger in an instant. Roar. Accompanied by a thunderous tiger roar, the nether evil tiger stepped on the flames, and the surrounding wind and sand were instantly swept by the black flames, turning into a flowing fire tornado. Some monsters and strange beasts attracted by the bloody smell of the corpse were instantly frightened and rooted underground, not daring to appear. In Chizioxio's horrified eyes, Muqiu pulled up the girl's petite body and sat on the back of the evil tiger. After the nether evil tiger roared, it rode away in the vast desert, leaving behind only a long tail flame and the girl's exclamation. At the same time, a human village located in a remote mountainous area. The corpses of humans and various beasts were mixed in various places in the village, and the strong smell of blood filled the surrounding mountains and fields. It was obvious that this place had also experienced a brutal massacre. And a large number of monsters were still roaming in the village, wantonly killing all the creatures they saw. The remaining humans on the ground began to kneel down and pray, praying for the salvation that even they had never expected. At this moment, an extremely bright and holy light suddenly shone in the sky. When everyone looked up, they saw a holy figure emitting golden light all over the body suddenly appearing in the sky on the other side. A head of golden long hair fell to the waist, and a long sword shining with holy golden light was held in her hand. The beautiful face was so beautiful under the shining of the holy light, and there was a dark green pendant hanging around her neck. Everyone had never seen such a beautiful woman, and they were stunned for a moment. Under the shining of the holy light, the fear in their hearts gradually receded. In front of the woman, there was a huge monster more than 10 meters high, with a pair of flying wings on its back, sharp fangs, and a ferocious face. The next second, the huge monster roared and rushed towards the woman. The woman stood in the air, facing the monster rushing towards her without fear, and waved the holy sword in her hand with a delicate shout. There were distinct patterns engraved on the sword, and at this moment, the golden light was bright, and an unmatched terrifying aura crushed over. The monster that rushed over felt this terrifying aura and its body stagnated instantly, and its deep red pupils shrank slightly. However, in this instant, the holy sword in the woman's hand had already fallen, and it actually directly split the huge monster in two from the head. The monster fell to the ground with a loud bang, and blood instantly spurted into the sky, like a bloody rain falling on the ground. At this moment, the encroaching monsters and strange beasts seemed to feel some fatal threat, and hurriedly fled towards the dark forest where the golden light could not reach. In a short moment, the army of monsters that attacked the village had fled and disappeared without a trace. The survivors were bathed in the holy light, and at this moment their bodies and minds seemed to be sublimated. They all knelt on the ground, put their hands together, looked devoutly at the holy figure in the sky, and shouted like prayers. Amidst the heavy prayers, Yefanyan looked up at the boundless sky with a complicated expression. There, it seemed that there was always a layer of haze covering it, and the sun was invisible. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 557. The news of the North Desert Lord's death caused quite a stir in the entire Yonjai dynasty. The Yonjai dynasty is divided into 12 continental regions, and each continent is headed by an Owl King, and under the Owl King are the lords of each major territory. The total number of lords in the 12 continents of Evernight is dozens if not 100, so the weight of a lord can be seen here. On weekdays, the alien races in the major territories are often at war with each other due to various conflicts, and the death of lord-level figures is also common. But what really surprised all the tribes was that the person who was rumored to have killed the Northern Desert Lord was actually a strong human race. The human race has long been ranked at the bottom of all races due to its own talent. Even if a lord is born, it will be a top powerhouse that has never been born among humans. But now a powerful human being who can kill a lord has actually appeared, which really surprised some well-informed aliens. Legend has it that when the powerful human race took action, blood rained from the sky, and even the earth turned into a sea of blood. Countless ghosts and ghosts were circling wildly between the heaven and the earth, like a demon coming to the world. So the world called the mysterious human strongman who appeared in the northern desert, the Blood Demon. Zhongzhou domain of Yanjai dynasty, the capital of Yanjai King. Reporting to your majesty, a mysterious fire suddenly appeared in the Nanchuan region. Tens of thousands of people in the Wanchuan region were swallowed up by the flames. The sky above Panchans in the Beis region collapsed. It took 7 days for the broken space to show signs of healing. Yuzhu region. A series of solemn voices echoed in the majestic hall, and a figure wearing armor knelt down and respectfully reported to the person on the throne. After dozens of breaths passed, the armored figure paused and continued. In addition, we have also received reports of strange phenomena in the sky and earth in more than a dozen border areas. We are currently sending people to investigate. The situation is still unclear. As soon as the words fell, the entire hall suddenly fell into silence. After a while, a deep voice came from the throne. Anything else? The being on the throne didn't seem surprised by the news, but just urged his subordinates to report other news. The armored figure continued. Your Majesty, the death of the northern desert lord under King Yehuangzal has caused quite a stir among all the clans. It is rumored that the lord of the northern desert was looking for a certain magic weapon, and the person who killed the lord of the northern desert was a mysterious human being. There is no news about this human being yet. The person on the throne just nodded when he heard the words. The dim light reflected a pair of dark red pupils and said calmly, apprehend this person as soon as possible to suppress the king's power. After all, he was just a lord, not worthy of his excessive care. Call the high priest and order him to divine all the news about the disaster star as soon as possible. I will personally end this trouble. As soon as the words fell, an indescribable and powerful royal power rushed out from the throne. The armored man kneeling below faced this terrifying king's power and trembled uncontrollably. This kind of suppression from his bloodline made him dare not move at all. He hurriedly lowered his head and said tremblingly, yes. After the armored man left, the entire hall fell into silence again. The remaining power dissipated, and a low voice came from the throne. The disaster star has come to this world. I want to see who can shake my huge eternal night kingdom. Under a steep cliff, 2 figures, one large and one small, were walking side by side. Is this the border area of Yuzhu territory? Muqiu held the black cat in her arms and looked down at the girl with animal ears beside her. After the netherworld evil tiger traveled day and night, the two of them passed through the Gobi desert in a few days, and the plants and shrubs in front of them gradually became more prosperous. Muqiu looked at Chi Xiaoxiu's body and found nothing strange. Strangely enough, the nether evil tiger, who had always had a surly temper, did not show any impatience after being carried by Chi Xiaoxiu, and was very obedient throughout the entire desert. You must know that as Muqiu's full-time pet, his predecessor was the Mangshan Qianhu, one of the 4 ferocious beasts in southern Xinjiang. The netherworld evil tiger has an extremely irritable personality. On the way to Zilan base, he once carried Lu Qianqian for a while, and almost made Lu Qianqian fascinated. But when they arrived at Chi Xiaoxiu's place, netherworld evil tiger became quite calm, which surprised Muqiu. According to the guidance of Chi Xiaoxiu's 5 senses, the source of the 6 paths closest to them is in Yuzhu, which is adjacent to the desert. Upon hearing Muqiu's question, Chi Xiaoxiu nodded like a rattle. Xiaoxiu can feel that there is a breath here that is very close to the light door in the master's hand. Chi Xiaoxiu didn't know what was going on, but her 5 senses had been greatly improved since entering the dark red space. Even the magic level jumped several levels, from the original level 3 to level 7. Although she is still a rookie with no fighting ability. And the strangest change is that she can actually sense the breath of reincarnation from a distance of thousands of kilometers, becoming a veritable humanoid radar. Muqiu looked at the dark sky in front of her, but suddenly closed her eyes. Although he was surrounded by the fragrance of grass and trees, he still smelled a subtle but very familiar scent. This was corpse energy. The corpse aura here is very strong. Mu opened her eyes and said. His body was previously the body of the Corpse King. Although it has long since evolved out of the zombie category, his bloodline still contains some corpse energy. Because of this, he is quite sensitive to corpse aura. Chi Xiaoxiao explained to Mu Qiu. Yuzhu region is the territory of the Corpse clan, so of course the Corpse Qi will be richer than in other continents. In the apocalyptic disaster thousands of years ago, the second-generation Demon Lord Yasha Demon Lord led the Eternal Night royal family to overwhelm the zombie clan with supreme power, killed several zombie kings, and ended the chaotic apocalypse. Then he sent the zombie king to suppress all the zombies. Thousand Corpses clan in Yuzhu zone. As if talking about the idol she admired, the little girl's words became excited. Now that thousands of years have passed, the Corpse clan has become one of the branches of the Yanjai royal clan. The Corpse clan's vitality is tenacious and its nature is extremely ferocious. It should not be underestimated. As soon as Chi Xiaoxiao finished speaking, Mu Qiu suddenly asked. Since the second-generation demon lord you mentioned is so powerful, why did she disappear mysteriously later? This is the key to Mu Qiu's thinking. In the illusion of the hungry ghost realm, Mu Qiu saw the picture of Shueqianya leading the Yanjai army against hundreds of thousands of zombies 1,000 years ago. There, Mu Qiu also saw a long-lost figure. The 12 immortal priests of the pagan religion. Although there is no news about the heterogeneous religion in this era, Mu Qiu has a vague feeling that the mysterious disappearance of this mysterious organization is definitely not that simple. Without obtaining the complete 8 sources of creation, this cult that started making trouble before the end of the world will never give up. What's even more bizarre is that at the end of that illusion scene, Mu Qiu actually heard Shueqianya's conversation across time and space. This made Mu Qiu even more certain that Shueqianya definitely did not retire or die as the legend said. Hearing Mu Qiu's question, even Chi Xiaoxiao, an enthusiastic fan of Shueqianya, hesitated. Some people say that the Empress could not withstand the erosion of time and died. There are also rumors that the Empress went to the endless void to find traces of the first-generation Demon Lord. But after 1,000 years, the accuracy of these rumors is questionable. Mu Qiu didn't believe that the heterogeneous sect, which had so many strong men, would let the Yanjai dynasty grow so much after Mu Qiu left. But shortly after Shueqianya disappeared, the heterogeneous religion gradually withdrew from the stage of history. What kind of secrets could be hidden behind this? For some reason, Mu Qiu smelled a hint of conspiracy from these clues. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 558. Mu Qiu and Chi Xiaoxiao walked along the cliff, but the monsters and wild beasts they encountered were surprisingly rare. In Chi Xiaoxiao's words, they were at the border of the 2 regions, and there were often some tribes of the Corpse clan stationed around. The Corpse clan was cruel and bloodthirsty by nature, and most of the creatures in the surrounding mountains and forests were eaten up by them. Looking at Mu Qiu with a calm face, Chi Xiaoxiao opened her mouth, wanting to remind him that this was the territory of the Corpse clan, and humans were the delicacy most favored by the Corpse clan. But when she thought of Mu Qiu's amazing strength beyond imagination, she took back the words on her lips. However, in a moment, the outline of a village appeared in front of the 2. What was different from a normal village was that the village in front of them looked quite old, and the material of the surrounding fences was also extremely rough. From a distance, it was all white, as if they had come to a primitive tribe. It was not until they got closer that they could see that these so-called houses were actually built with pieces of white bones. Some of the skeletons were huge, and it was obvious that they were from ferocious monsters in the mountains and forests. As for some skeletons, they were thin, as if they were taken from humanoid creatures. What was even more creepy was that, as if to show their strength, each simple house was inlaid with a weathered skull. I didn't expect the people here to be so artistic. Mu Qiu stroked his chin and commented on the village in front of him that looked like a primitive tribe. Chi Xiao Xiao beside him twitched slightly at the corner of his mouth and remained silent. Just like that, the two of them walked into this tribe full of death without hesitation. The deeper they went, the more they saw the gloomy bones everywhere, and from time to time they could see fences made of bones next to the surrounding houses. Chi Xiao Xiao was stunned when she saw the bone fence. The people imprisoned in the fence were not ordinary livestock, but men and women who were half-dressed. The sun was shining brightly, and these humans were kept in the pens like livestock. Some were even sunburned to dehydration, with festering skin, curled up in the corner, with flies and poisonous insects circling around them, sucking blood from their bodies. The situation of these humans was even more miserable than the slaves in the northern desert. The stronger ones were used as breeding tools, while the remaining old, weak, and disabled were numb, waiting for their fate of being slaughtered at any time. Compared with risking their lives to hunt monsters in the mountains and forests, these powerless humans not only had delicious meat, but also were weak, making them the only food choice for the corpse clan. Mu Qiu walked through the pens one by one, just glanced at the humans trapped in them, and then walked forward with a calm look. There is nothing to say about the world where the strong prey on the weak and the fittest survive. The strange thing is that after entering the tribe, except for occasionally seeing some captive humans, there was no trace of the corpse clan here. It was not until half a day later that a strange cheer came from the center of the village. Mu Qiu and Chi Xiao Xiao looked at each other and walked towards the depths of the village. In the center of the village, a unique carnival party was being held. A group of corpses gathered in front of the stone pillars of the altar, making strange low moans and bursts of laughter from time to time. These corpses looked extremely ugly. Although their bodies were still like humans, their faces seemed to have been peeled off a layer of skin, revealing the flesh and blood inside. Their eyeballs were even black, and their bodies were shriveled like corpses. At their feet, there were piles of white bones, with 6 smiles on their faces, dancing and performing some kind of ceremony. Not far away, a group of humans wearing linen clothes were tied up, their eyes were full of despair and fear. Right in the center of the altar, there stood a priest in a long robe, mumbling some kind of spell. When Mu Qiu and Chi Xiao Xiao arrived, they saw this scene. Seeing these terrifying corpses, Chi Xiao Xiao exclaimed, "It's the cannibal clan." As a large clan with a wide range of uses, the corpse clan has many different branches. Zombies, vampires, mummies, etc. all belong to the corpse clan. The cannibal clan in front of them is a branch of the zombie clan. At this time, the cannibal clan that was holding a ritual in front also discovered the existence of the two. Ga! The priest standing on the altar uttered a strange low hum, commanding his corpses to take down Mu Qiu and the others. Those skinning monsters instantly roared and rushed towards Mu Qiu and the others. Chi Xiao Xiao was no longer afraid of this, and even imitated Mu Qiu with a sarcastic smile on her face. She knew that the person standing next to her was a real great god, and these shrimp soldiers and crab generals were no match for Mu Qiu. "Master, with these." Chi Xiao Xiao turned her head, but found that there was no one beside her. At this moment, Mu Qiu's smiling voice came from behind her. "Come on, I'm rooting for you." She turned her head stiffly, but found that Mu Qiu was stroking the kitten in his arms and looking at her with a kind face. At this moment, Chi Xiao Xiao felt that her psychological defense line collapsed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 559. Master. Chi Xiaoxiao's mouth twitched, and she pointed at the cannibal monsters rushing in front of her, and turned her head stiffly. She happened to see Mu Qiu, who was holding a black cat a few dozen meters behind her, waving at her with a kind smile on his face. "Come on. Seeing that Mu Chiu had no intention of making a move and looked like he was just watching a show, the little girl swallowed her saliva, turned around seriously, and her eyes were more determined. She stretched out her right hand, and the space jade bracelet on her wrist flashed a strange light. The next second, a huge sickle with an exaggerated shape and a dark white body appeared in her hand. This sickle was forged from the bones of an unknown creature, with protruding bone spurs, and looked ferocious and a bit scary. Chi Xiao took a deep breath, raised the sickle that was even bigger than her petite body, and slashed at the cannibal monster in front. And Mu Chiu appeared on the stone pillar in the center of the altar without knowing when. The priest standing beside the altar saw a human appear above his head, and he roared, revealing the hideous flesh under his face, and jumped towards the human on the top of the stone pillar. Mu Chiu's eyes were always overlooking the battle below, until the corpse priest was only a few feet away from him, and his sharp claws pierced his eyes with murderous intent. Mu Chiu then raised a finger faintly, and a flash of lightning shot out from the fingertips, which went straight through the top of the priest's head. The priest, whose strength was faintly at the level of a demon general, turned into a charred ashes in the next moment. From beginning to end, Mu Chiu did not shift his sight at all, and looked at the battle below with a thoughtful look in his eyes. Chi Xiao rushed into the group of corpses with a bone sickle in her hand, narrowed her eyes slightly, and began to slash randomly without any rules. The petite body was swallowed up by the corpses in an instant, but the next second a group of magic energy fluctuations exploded in the center of the corpses. Chi Xiao injected all the magic energy in her body into the bone sickle in her hand, and a blood-red edge quickly appeared on the blade. The huge blade was waving in the air, and the messy knife light instantly cut off the bodies of dozens of man-eating monsters approaching. The broken part of the wound gushed out a large amount of blood like a fountain, and it seemed that a vacuum zone was formed around Chi Xiao. The man-eating ghosts and monsters approaching were cut by the blood light on the blade and fell to the ground. It seemed that even Chi Xiao had never thought that her strength would become so powerful. Slowly opening her squinting eyes, she saw a group of corpses lying beside her, and her face first showed an incredible look. Then she turned her head and looked at the bright red blood light on the sickle. Chi Xiao's eyes showed joy, raised the sickle in her hand and slashed wildly at the corpses around her. Blood flew everywhere, and wherever it passed, it caused a bloody storm. The hundreds of cannibal ghost corpses were chased and killed by the girl like cutting melons and vegetables. The situation was reversed in an instant. Mu Chiu on the altar was amazed at this scene. After experiencing the hungry ghost path once, Chi Xiao's magic power soared from level 3 to level 7, and even her strength had undergone earth-shaking changes. But what Mu Chiu cared about most was not the change in Chi Xiao's strength, but Mu Chiu set his eyes on the blade of the sickle in Chi Xiao's hand, where a bright red blood light could be clearly seen. The blood light seemed to have great lethality to these corpse ghosts. After being hit by the blade, the cannibal ghost corpses, the blood in the body seemed to be drawn by something and flowed rapidly, and even the already incomplete souls were seriously damaged. The blood light gave Mu Chiu a very familiar feeling, which belonged to the hungry ghost path. Mu Chiu didn't know what kind of change had happened to Chi Xiao. The magic power in her body was actually tainted with the breath of the 6 reincarnations. Now Chi Xiao can even fight against an opponent with magic power level 7, not to mention the existence of magic power level 8. Looking at the petite girl chasing a group of corpses on the battlefield, Mu Chiu narrowed his eyes slightly. He felt that this girl was not as simple as she looked. The cannibals are also a relatively weak class among the corpses, and their strength is generally not high. In addition, Chi Xiao's magic power contains the breath of hungry ghosts, which is specifically used to defeat the ghosts of the corpses. These monsters are not even a match for her. After a while, with Chi Xiao shouting and swinging the sickle in her hand, the last cannibal corpse was cut in half with one knife, and the scene suddenly became silent. Chi Xiao stopped swinging her arms, which were a little sore, and turned around to look around. At this moment, her feet were covered with bloody limbs and arms, and hundreds of cannibal corpses were completely disinfected by her. Dead, all dead. Chizioxio's flat chest rose and fell, and she was panting heavily, with mottled blood on her body. But she was not terrified, but showed a strange excitement. At this moment, Mu Qiu appeared beside Qi Xiaoxiao, and Qi Xiaoxiao immediately showed off to Mu Qiu excitedly. Master, Master, look, I did it. Qi Xiaoxiao put away her weapon and trotted to Mu Qiu. The expression on her face was like a child asking for candy after completing a task. This girl is calling Master more and more intimately now. Mu Qiu touched the girl's head, smiled slightly and commented. Well done. Mu Qiu originally wanted to test Qi Xiaoxiao's ability after awakening, but now it seems that the latter's strength has indeed exceeded Mu Qiu's original expectation. With that said, the two walked towards the altar built in the center of the tribe. The edge of the entire altar was also made of white bones, with strange runes carved around it, and peeling human skin hanging on the four sides. In the middle stood a huge stone pillar, with a bruised human being tied to the stone pillar. Mu Qiu and the two walked into the altar. Tied to the stone pillar was a stout man, who was completely different from the humans in the tribe who were kept like livestock. The man's mouth was blocked with a piece of cloth, and there were blood stains on his body. When he saw Mu Qiu and the two approaching, he let out a strange hesitating cry. As Mu Qiu thought, the ball of cloth in the man's mouth suddenly burst into flames and turned into ashes instantly. Ahem! The man coughed several times and hurriedly spit out the ashes in his mouth, regardless of his exhausted body. Mu Qiu looked at the man and said, "Where are you from?" He could tell at a glance that the man in front of him contained supernatural powers and was an alien among humans. And judging from the man's clothes and body shape, he didn't look like a human being kept captive by these cannibals. Mu Qiu was not interested in playing word games, so she spoke with hints from her soul. The man who was attracted by Mu Qiu's words turned his head, with a bit of trembling in his voice. Human cage, I escaped from the human cage. Human cage. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 560. Mu Qiu had heard that Fire Seed was an organization established by humans to resist oppression, and he thought that the man in front of him was also a member of Fire Seed. However, what was the human cage mentioned by this man? Mu Qiu felt that the magic power in the injured man's body was at least level 8. In the end times, he was also an A-level awakener close to S-level. It was difficult for ordinary beings to catch him and beat him into the state. Mu Qiu looked at the beast-eared girl beside him, and Qi Xiaoxiao immediately understood. She stood on tiptoe and whispered in Mu Qiu's ear. The human cage is a large cage built by the Corpse clan in Yuzhu to imprison humans. The people imprisoned in it are all aliens among humans. Qi Xiaoxiao's explanation made Mu Qiu understand that humans are the most beloved meat of the Corpse clan, and the nobles in the Corpse clan are also very picky about the quality of human flesh. Ordinary humans who are kept in captivity like livestock can only be regarded as the lowest level of food, and only some relatively low-level aliens will eat them. The food that really interests those high-level corpses is the human beings with superpowers. And the so-called human cage is a human slaughterhouse that specializes in cultivating high-quality ingredients for the nobles. After saying the name of the human cage, the man's eyes were extremely terrified, as if he had seen some extremely terrifying and peerless monster. His face was crazy, and his whole body couldn't help trembling. Mu Qiu looked directly into the man's eyes, a red light flashed in his pupils, and he asked relentlessly. Then how did you escape from the human cage? As the highest level slaughterhouse of the Corpse clan, it must be heavily guarded. There must be something wrong with the man in front of him to escape. Influenced by the soul suggestion, the man spoke subconsciously, but his words still had a weak tremor, which showed that his fear of the human cage had penetrated into his bones. A few months ago, there was a riot in the human cage, and most of the human cages were destroyed. I also escaped in that riot. The man hesitated for a long time, and Miu and the others just understood what he meant. It turned out that a riot suddenly broke out in the human cage not long ago. It seemed that an unknown existence attacked the human cage, causing the cage holding humans to break and disintegrate. A large number of human aliens escaped and joined the riot, and the entire human cage was almost completely destroyed. In the end, it was the contemporary Owl King of the Corpse Clan who personally took action to suppress the riot. But even so, some aliens still escaped from the cage. The man in front of him escaped from the riot and was wanted by the Corpse Clan for a long time before he finally came to this border between the two domains. But unfortunately, he was spotted by the cannibal tribe here, and he was quickly captured with serious injuries. Just when he was about to be eaten by these man-eating monsters, Miu and the others rushed here, and then the next thing happened. Human cage. Miu muttered to himself, then said. Who destroyed the human cage and caused the riot? The man tied to the stone pillar said tremblingly. I saw it from a distance. It was a human man. He was so powerful that he could kill the Lord-level warden. In the end, it was the Owl King who suppressed him. The man's eyes were filled with undisguised shock. I have never seen such a powerful human. After killing the Lord-level warden, he could still fight the Owl King. Half of the entire human cage was destroyed in the battle between him and the Owl King. A strong human. Miu narrowed his eyes slightly. According to the man's words, the human who attacked the human cage had at least the strength of the destruction level. At the same time, in the central part of Yuzhu, in a giant building shaped like a honeycomb, under countless burning and greedy eyes, a fierce battle was taking place on the platform below. The two sides of the battle were not ferocious beasts, but two human aliens with magic power. Two human men fought fiercely with bare hands, punching each other to the flesh, and each punch was filled with the desperate killing intent to kill the other. After a quarter of an hour, both of them were covered with bruises and scars. Finally, one of the men punched through his opponent's head with a powerful punch, and the fight ended with blood gushing out. The headless body fell to the ground, causing the audience on the stage to cheer, but more attention was focused on the winning man. To be more precise, it was the man's muscular body, the beautiful lines on his well-proportioned body, and the blood all over his body that seemed like spices sprinkled on tender steaks. Gurgle. There was a hungry gurgling sound from the stage, and countless hungry eyes stared at the man below. In the end, the man under the stage was taken away by the prison guards, and the headless body left on the stage was divided up by the swarming audience. The sounds of looting and eating intertwined, and the whole scene seemed to have turned into a gluttonous feast. Just at the top of the building of this gluttonous feast, footsteps suddenly came from the empty darkness. Boom! The tightly closed stone door opened, and a figure wearing a red cloak walked through the prison door. This was a huge and extremely empty prison. The flickering candlelight illuminated the figure of a man tied with iron chains on a skeleton deep in the prison door. The man's whole body was tied tightly with special iron chains, his clothes were ragged, his hair was stained with blood, and his head was lowered, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. What's even more horrifying is that most of the flesh and blood on the man's body has been chopped off alive, and even the white bones can be seen. The blood threads on the skeleton squirmed as if they were alive, and there was a faint tendency to heal. Even the king of the corpse tribe couldn't help being shocked after seeing this scene. Such a terrifying self-healing ability is simply unlike ordinary people. Human, your flesh and blood is truly the most delicious thing I have ever tasted. The figure wearing a red cloak smiled evilly, with some unfinished meaning in his voice. I can't help but eat you in one breath. Well, if you tell me where you are from, I can consider keeping your whole body. The man on the skeleton moved his jaw slightly when he heard this, slowly raised his head, twitched the corners of his mouth, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and said word by word, "I am your ancestor."